Welcome back to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. You're watching Network Africa, coming to you live from Lagos, Nigeria on Channels Television. Please check out our top stories on our website, channelstv.com, and on youtube.com/channelsweb. We would like you to also log on to channelstv.com, that's m.channelstv.com on your mobile device from wherever you are in the world, and you'll be live onto us. Also download the Channels TV app for Android, iOS and Windows phones from their respective stores. A huge mass has been called and held at the instance of Pope Francis as part of his schedule on his first visit to Africa. Thousands of people are out celebrating the mass with Pope Francis at a university campus in Nairobi in spite of the heavy downpour. During the religious ceremony, Pope Francis made a plea for traditional values, saying the health of any society depends on the health of its families. The Pope also urged Kenyans to work for peace and reconciliation on his first trip as pontiff to Africa amid a rise in militant violence.
Honored, humbled and privileged that you have chosen to begin your apostolic voyage to Africa right here in Kenya. And we take this opportunity to welcome you to Kenya as we also welcome you to Africa.
Our societies experience divisions, whether ethnic, religious or economic. All men and women of goodwill are called to work for reconciliation and peace, forgiveness and healing. In the work of building a sound democratic order, strengthening cohesion and integration, tolerance and respect for others, the pursuit of the common good must be a primary goal.
Well, that's Pope Francis speaking at the State House reception in Kenya. Well, let's talk more about what the Pope has been up to today. We're now being joined by Jill Craig from Nairobi. She's been monitoring the Pope's movement. She joins me now live on Network Africa. Thank you for speaking to us. What a day it's been. In spite of the heavy downpour, thousands still came out. What more can you tell us?
Yes, and they didn't just come out, they came out very, very early this morning. You know, some of the people that we spoke with, they had been standing in line since 3 a.m. So they were saying how they had actually gotten up for this visit at 2 a.m. And there were reports of some people actually sleeping outside overnight just to make sure they wouldn't miss it. So you can imagine with heavy downpours last night, this morning, I would say there was just a very constant drizzle, to say the least. This all added up to a lot of mud. It was, you know, a lot of people could have considered it to be a miserable weather experience, but actually people here were very excited about seeing the Pope, and I think that that actually sort of helped them sort of ignore the weather conditions that were going on around them. So when you were actually at the Mass, there were umbrellas everywhere. You know, people were just sort of waiting for the next little drizzle to come along. But like I said, everyone was very excited to see the Pope, so I think that kind of outweighed the weather conditions today.
Right. You know, it's very hard to ignore what the Pope said during the state dinner about peace amongst families. What informed that, and how well was that message received?
Well, the Pope made a very specific mention today about how he admires, I think, what he called traditional African values. And so he made a point to mention that. And then he also said that, you know, he urged men not to be arrogant. He urged people not to hurt or demean women. And he also said that there was a responsibility to care for children. And, you know, he said very nice things about African traditional values in terms of, you know, just how people treat elderly well and how they love children. So I think that those messages really resonated with the Kenyans in the audience today. And these are all things that, you know, I think it meant a lot for them to have the Pope say that.
That's right. Now let's talk about the meeting the Kenyan president, that's Uhuru Kenyatta, had with the Pope. I believe they had a meeting earlier. What was the outcome of that meeting?
Sure. So when the first meeting that the Pope had actually yesterday was he was driven straight from the airport to State House to meet with Mr. Kenyatta, and he gave some talking points that were much to be expected. He talked about helping the poor, he talked about taking care of the environment, and he made a loosely veiled comment about having a transparent government with good governance, and I believe he worded it such that we should be careful with how we use our resources and make sure that they're equitably distributed. So I think that those comments at State House sort of did what the Pope does, which is he makes a point, but sometimes he makes it in a more veiled, vague, diplomatic fashion. So I think that's sort of what happened. But on the other hand, he also comes right out and says other things. So right now, for example, he's at the United Nations Environment Program, and as we are speaking, he's also speaking there with officials, and he's made it very, very clear that we have a duty to preserve our environment, not just for ourselves, but for the future generations. So I think that the Pope has really said some things that are making Kenyans think.
That's right. So what will the Pope be getting up to later on today? I mean, it's been 24 hours plus since he's been in Africa.
Yeah, I think he's probably tired by this point with all the activities he's had. And this morning, actually, he met with some inter-religious leaders. So he met with some Muslims, some Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, and Protestants, I believe. And then later he met with other Catholic officials. So put that all together, and you have a very, very long day for Pope Francis. So after tonight's meeting at the United Nations, I think he's probably just going to head to bed, I would say. And then tomorrow he'll get up early again and go to the Nairobi slum of Kangemi, where he'll be expected to talk to, obviously, about poverty issues. And then he's also expected to give a mass at one of the local parishes there. And actually, another point to be made is that the vestments that he was wearing today, at least the chasuble, was made by a women's sewing group. Well,
That's
not women,
great.
sorry, a sewing group in Kangemi. So, I'm sure that they'll be very proud to see him again after he's worn something they made yesterday.
Absolutely.
So he'll be doing... Yeah, so he'll be doing that, and then he's meeting with some youth, and then he meets with bishops, and then he gets on the plane and he heads off to Uganda.
Jill Craig, thank you so much for keeping an eye on the Pope in Nairobi. We'll get back to you as in the course of his visit in Nairobi. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, the Pope has been advocating for a better environment. Well, this is what is happening to the environment in Ethiopia. That country is currently faced with an adverse effect of droughts, which has led to a massive spike in food and water, which is now being seriously needed across the country. According to a top UN official on humanitarian affairs, well, she is warning that the weather condition needs to be urgently addressed before it becomes rather unbearable. The current drought is considered the worst to hit Ethiopia and the surrounding region in more than 3 decades, while the current El Nino is considered equal to, if not greater, than the so-called Super El Nino of 1997 and 1998.
Rainfall and subsequent drought has led to a massive spike in food, nutrition, and water needs across the country. The national community must step up in support of the Ethiopian government and people at this time of severe need. While the current El Nino and La Nina drought is common in the Horn of Africa, the intensity this year is equal to, if not greater than, the so-called Super El Nino of 1997 and 1998.
Meanwhile, livestock farmers in South Africa are not spared from the devastating effect of El Nino, as it takes a huge toll on their livestock. The situation is forcing many to sell their stocks or lose animals on their farms. Livestock auctions now happen weekly to deal with the effects of the drought, while the government is working to grant emergency aid to farmers.
Zeerust in South Africa's northwest province is experiencing one of the driest seasons in over a century, and farmers are already beginning to feel the heat. 36-year-old Ketumetse says it's becoming difficult to sustain her herd. On average, one cow consumes 20 liters of water a day, an amount farmers are struggling to keep up with, as their boreholes are currently pumping water 3 times slower than during a normal rainy season.
There is a severe drought here because we don't have food for the cows. We have to buy them food, and it's not raining. When it doesn't rain, there are more problems.
According to data provided by Reuters, the low rainfall and rolling heat waves that have marked the start of this summer come on the heels of 2014-2015, which was the driest season since 1991-1992. The Weather Service measures seasonal rainfall by the Southern Hemisphere summer, so has not yet made a call about the severity of the current season. But things are clearly not looking good. The 2014-2015 season, for example, was also the third driest for South Africa as a whole since the early 1930s, when the country was hit by a historic drought in the midst of the Great Depression. Livestock auctions are now held once a week in the Northwest Province, with farmers selling off their cows for as little as $70.
It's better off getting a few rents for your remaining livestock as to opposed to them dying due to drought and lack of rain and stuff. So it's better off selling at a lower price than getting nothing out of your remaining livestock.
Authorities have earmarked some 450 million rand for drought-affected regions, but officials fear it may not be enough to stem the damage in the hardest hit areas such as Gauteng and the southeastern province of KwaZulu-Natal.
We're not worried about the financials for this year, and even the planting of this year. I think the finances has already been delivered and approved and everything else. So it's not about that. It is purely, are they going to have a harvest next year? Because if they don't going to have a harvest, then we're going to have 3 years of underperforming rain, and that is when the trick starts, because that will be the fourth year and that is normally when the trouble starts.
The drought is expected to push down livestock and meat prices, but costlier maize, South Africa's staple, is expected to hurt poor and rural households. Officials have promised to send water tankers to farms and relocate some livestock to state-owned land where there are better pasture.
We'll take another short break on Network Africa. When we come back, Gambia bans female genital mutilation, a country where 3/4 of the women there already have had the procedure. In a moment.